welcome to Taya Mini Reads, Reviews, Discusses, Monologues about everything and anything, and that's on period. Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna do a different kind of book review. I'm gonna be doing like a comparison, or not really a comparison, but like I read two books back to back that were so similar, and that's how I just was inspired to do this video. And it wasn't actually even on purpose. Like I just read them, and after reading, I was like, oh my god, these books are so similar, and maybe I should do a video and talk about it just at once. So without doing too much, I'm just gonna start. The first book will be The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. And I have the synopsis, like just a little bit. I'm just going to read that. So it says, from the award winning author comes a powerful love story set against the political upheaval of 1950 terrain. Roya, a dreamy and idealistic teenager, finds a literary oasis in the stationery shop where she meets Batman, whose burning passion for justice and love of poetry mirrors her own. So that's the first book, and that's the synopsis for The Stationery Shop. So we have Roya and we have Batman. And the second one is Homeseeking by Karissa Chen. So Karissa Chen, I'm just going to read it real quick. Haiwan is buying bananas at 99 Ranch Market in Los Angeles when he looks up and sees Sushi. He's Sushi for the first time in 60 years. To recently widowed Haiwan, it feels like a second chance, but Sushi has only survived by refusing to look back. Sushi was 7 when she first met Haiwan in their Shanghai neighborhood, drawn by the sound of his violin. Their childhood friendship blossomed into so deep love, but when Haiwan was secretly enlisted in the Nationalist Army in 1947 to save his brother from the draft, she was left with just his violin and a note saying, "Forgive me." So they are both set in like I want it to be framed. Okay, here we go. So they are both set in war periods. That's like the backdrop. This is 1957. This is 1947. So just some difference in the years, but it's really similar teams. And they are both about two youngins or two young people who fall in love, and then we quickly realize that they actually never got to be together, right? So, and for both stories, it's present, right? In Homeseeking, Haiwan sees Sushi in 99 Ranch. I love 99 Ranch. And then in the stationery shop, I think it's actually different. We just see Roya's, we just see her point of view. Not with Batman, she's by herself, but she's obviously older. So those are the two books, and I'll just go ahead. So the first thing is the backdrop. So there is obviously a political war backdrop, wartime period going on. In the stationery shop, it's more of a traditionalist versus like new world, new age. They have a Shah, and I guess they were trying to overthrow the Shah and bring in like a prime minister, arms of government, that kind of stuff. So Tehran was going through a lot of political upheaval, and we quickly realized that Bahman is I want to say like an activist, but yeah. And then in Homeseeking, it's around the time when the Japanese can't speak. The Japanese invaded China, and then they were defeated by the Allied forces, and so they left China, mainland China. But then at that point, China was trying to find themselves, and so there was the communists versus the nationalists, and that was that backdrop, that war, right? So, and though in this one, Haiwan is a unwilling enlister. It's not like he really wanted to enlist in the war. He could have cared less for who was in power. Versus here, Bachman is like super, super like he's like an activist. So that's some difference. And another thing that they had in similarity was they both had like the girls, like Roya's dad and Sushi's dad, were both very progressive dads, fathers. they were, inspiring their children to do better, to do more. They pushed them, right? And especially Sushi's dad, he had like a bookstore, like he had a bookshop. So that's another similarity. Like he had a bookshop, and in the stationery shop, they literally meet in the stationery shop. So that was also something cool that I was like, oh my god. So anyways, their dads, really pushed them to be better versions of themselves. And for that time period, like it's so rare to find a dad that would, be like, all girls actually matter the same way boys do, right? So they push for them to have education, they push for them to do better in life, and throughout their life, they would both reflect and be like, yeah, my dad was, he was just the best dad. So uh a lot of political views were in this book, in the books. For this one, Bachman, like I said, was an activist, and at some point, Roya had to kind of, you could see her trying to understand, like, okay, what's this versus this, why this versus that, So this was it was good because she wasn't really invested, but she was like, well, this war is affecting my family, it's affecting my relationship. I really need to know, you know, who's who and why are we doing this, right? So it was like a soft, I mean, Roya, like Bachman was all into politics, and he was super active and engaged. In Homeseeking, though, the what I want to touch on is the author. She did a very fantastic job in transmitting or conveying the fact that in Homeseeking, even after the war is over, you see that effect go through, the different families, like, from parents to grandparents to brothers to sisters to grandkids, that kind of stuff. Like, you see the effect, right? And this was a very it was very thought provoking. It was very sad because neighbors were telling on neighbors, friends were turning on friends, family was turning on family, just because they wanted to survive. So, I mean, I wouldn't say anyone was super wrong, but again, it just transports you to a time period where you were actually afraid for just who you were, because they were judging people based on what they had done in the past. So there literally was no way for you to even be like, "Oh yeah, I've changed." No, they were literally straight up lynching people once the communists took over, right? And so for the longest time, Haiwan was in the nationalist army, right? So he couldn't contact his family for over 30 years, just because if even after so much time after the war, if there was even a whiff that you had ties to the nationalist people, or that kind of stuff, your whole family could be executed. So it was really, really, the tension was high, and I was like, man, like, I feel bad for all the people who actually lived through that time period. It wasn't fun. I'm just gonna say it, like, deeply, deeply, like, afraid for your life. And you see that in Sushi and her sister Sulan's parents. They are able to send their kids away before the war kind of kicks off. So they were able to save their kids, but the book doesn't really tell us what happens to her dad, but obviously something happens that's not really good. Whereas in Stationery Shop, it's just the war, and after the war is over, that's pretty much it. So I would say that this one went more into the themes of, what the effects that war has on a family, the generation, and just, lost time, right? Because the girls had to be separated from their parents from when they were like maybe 16, 17. I'm not sure about the ages, but they were super young, and they left mainland China. They moved to Hong Kong. Yeah, I think she moved to Hong Kong, Sushi, and her sister. And they had to make it in life, right? And Sushi quickly realizes that, yeah, my whole childhood was a fairy tale compared to the real world. So, That's that's some of the similarities. The other one is that both books were about separation. The leads were separated, families were separated, regret. There was a lot of longing. At some points in the book, Haiwan, whenever we got his point of view, he would be like just lying down, just like a reel in his mind of all the people that he ever loved, like his family, his girlfriend Sushi, and his neighbors, his sister, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of longing. There's a lot of like regret. I should have said this. I should have done that. I should have been more vocal. I should have been more more expressive. We don't really see a lot of that here because once Roya and Bachman's engagement is kind of canceled, right? And it's canceled due to shenanigans, right? Somebody did some shenanigans, and letters were, kind of switched because they were communicating primarily through letters. And so one letter was forged, and something led to something, and their engagement fell through, right? So because of that, whereas dad, he's like, well, I don't really see a future for you girls here. Like I said, he's very progressive, right? And so he is able to send them to the US for them to get an education. So that's another similarity, is that in both books we see that the leads, they started from their home country, but then they were able to move to the US. Here, like I said, Roya went to school, and another thing is they both had sisters. So Roya had a sister, I forgot her name, but Roya had a sister, and the sister relationship in both books were fantastic. Sushi had her sister Sulan, and they were, besties for the whole book. So that's something that was really done very well. Um, the other thing that I really liked, or would say like was a similarity, was both books were able to weave a story through real life events and tell such a thought provoking story. Now, I would say, if I, Homeseeking was fantastic. Same with the Stationery Shop. Like they were able to use real, events that were happening in that time period and just create craft, a story of some sort. So that's another similarity that happened. Okay, so maybe let's do some what I liked and what I didn't like, right? Or who I liked and who I didn't like more. I'm just gonna go into the characters. So in Homeseeking, we have Haiwan, and another thing that I wanted to quickly mention is the author. She made sure that for each country or state that they were living in, she wrote the book in the dialect, like the local dialect. So if they were in Shanghai, they were speaking Shanghainese. If they were in Hong Kong, they were speaking the local language. If they were in Taiwan, Taipei, it was a different intonation, right? It's the same language, but obviously different groups have different ways that they speak. So even the names were different. Like Sushi was her mainland China name. When she moved to Hong Kong, she was Soke, and then when she was in the US, she was Susu, and she had other names I can't remember. Haiwan was Haiwan, he was Haivan, he was Howard, so that was really nice to see the names being, expressed that way. I thought that was really cool. She also, definitely put in some Chinese expressions, which I speak and I kind of understand some Chinese. So it was really nice to see that in print with the book. The characters. So Howard to me was a coward. I think he was a coward. The only thing he ever did in his life that was probably courageous was enlisting, right? Because he actually didn't need to. I don't want to get into it to spoil the story, but to me, I think any other time period, Howard is actually a coward, or Haiwan. He should have been more upfront with Sushi. He should have been more upfront about, his feelings and his thought, and he probably should have fought for her. But I would agree that no matter whatever he did, they probably would still not have ended up together because, like I said, their separation was due to a war that had nothing to do with them, and it was so unfortunate. This was not a man-made separation. It was just such as life. So that's Howard. Sushi, I really liked Sushi when she was younger. She was so spirited. She was so, full of action. She was like so like that girl, right? But then she goes through a lot. And again, I don't blame her. Like life goes through her, right? And so she starts out so spirited, so snappy. She's like sassy. You can't say a word. She's like 10 words out, So she was that kind of person when she was younger. But she went through a lot of stuff. And you can just see at the end of the book, she's more reserved, subdued, and she has, definitely changed. So when Haiwan meets her, he immediately realizes it's like, man, she's the same, but she's not really the same. So I think that was the saddest part. Also, the part where she was so scared to go meet her parents because she was like, I have brought shame to my parents, and what have I done in my life? Which I cried with her because I was like, they love you regardless. I don't rate yourself by that. But I think she also realized like I could have been so much more. I could have been better, and so it was really sad. But I mean, it was so like I agreed with how the characters were fleshed out and how they came out. Like that, it just was on par, right? in Stationery Shop, like I said, the story is a singular event that changes Roya's life, right? She was supposed to get married to this dude, and then it didn't happen, and so she moved to the US. And in the US, literally the first guy she meets, she ends up marrying that guy. So it's kind of different, right? So she ends up marrying someone else, but she always had this like, what happened to this guy Batman? Like, why didn't we ever end up? And this was a very good, like, it's a very good thought provoking series. Like the books is do you or did you in your life marry the person you loved or the person you came to love? In that's Maria's scenario in the Stationery Shop. Obviously, she married someone that she came to love, but Bachman was her true soulmate. That was her life. That was her love, the love of her life, right? Same in Homeseeking, right? Sushi and Howard both married other people, but when they come together due to circumstances, I mean, throughout even their life apart, they both knew that they were each other's soulmates. So they obviously married people that they grew to love, but those were not the love of their lives. So um yeah, so this was a singular event that kind of changed the course of one girl's life, whereas this was, so many things, a war that no one wanted, no one, they just derailed their lives. And another thing was Homeseeking had music. Haiwan and Suchi were, they had love for music, and it was so interesting to read, Haiwan learning the violin and playing the classical records like Debussy and Pangini. So I like that touch. It was so different. The characters in this book, they obviously suffered more. Sushi suffered. Howard suffered. Sulan suffered. I was like, she got us straight. Like she could have had a good life, but no, she suffered. Their parents also suffered. Like everyone suffered in this book, and it wasn't actually sad. Like I wasn't like wailing, when I finished the book, but I just felt like a kind of, I don't know how to say, like a quiet sadness, just because it was just so sad to see, what these people went through and how that time period just affected lives for generations to come, right? Because, it impacted their whole family. And another thing is they both each had one kid, right? The Sushi had one child. Roya also, well, kind of had one child. But then yeah, and then in the stationery shop, Roya actually eventually meets Bakman. I mean, that happens in both books, right? Howard meets Sushi years, like 50 years later. Same with stationery shop. Roya is able to actually meet Bakman and quickly realizes that the reason why they were separated was due to someone manipulating stuff. And, it was just so sad. So she shared a moment with him, and then, that was it. So, and obviously she went back to her husband. Like I said, she had a husband. So, that story was, I guess there was some resolution because she did realize, and it was just so sad. It was just regret, like, oh my God, what could have been, right? Whereas in Homeseeking, it's kind of a happy story. So this is so funny. For me, I always want the leads to get together. I'm like, oh, yes, that's the perfect ending for me. But in this book, they did get together, but it was so unfulfilled because of the ending. I'm not going to spoil it, read it, and I guess you would know. Literally, it's like the last, second to the last chapter. I was like, I wanted more. Like, don't just do that, So for that, I'm ducking point. I'm ducking points because I was like, no, like they're together, that's okay, but I want to see, I wanted to see another reunion on page, but I guess the author decided not to. But yeah, so that's my take on these two books. And another thing I would be remiss if I don't mention it is the food. So fantastic. I didn't know there were a lot of cuisine in Terrain. They had a lot of, food that Roya was cooking, and that's actually how she met her, or that's how she actually got her husband, kind of, because of she cooked him a meal and he loved the meal, and that kind of became their thing. Whereas here, I mean, there was no cooking for anybody, but the author just made sure to incorporate a lot of foods and the different types of food, the different ways they were made. I mean, it was just so interesting, fascinating to read it. Overall, this was my top pick. This is my top favorite. I would definitely read this book because I would read it again. It was so thought provoking. It was a very I mean I don't even know the words to describe. This was one of the best books I have read in 2025. It's not a 5-star book because I did not like the ending. I wanted more. I mean, what's 2 pages just to give us that ending? So it's not a 5-star, but it's like a 4.9. And this one, so I believe that if I didn't read this, I would be like, yeah, this is like a four star. It still wasn't gonna be 5-star, but like it'd be like a up there. But because they were so similar, I think this book really captures that whole, you lost something and making your way back to it. The Chinese call it, they say something called yuan fen. Yuan fen is like fate. So in this book, fate, Harwan and Sushi's yuan fen is so strong that they are pulled back to each other. Imagine not having a phone. You can't reach someone. You can't talk to them. You don't even know if they're dead or alive. That's literally their story here until, years, decades later after the war is over. Whereas here, she could actually contact him. It's just more of, like I said, a miscommunication. So for those reasons, this is like a 3.9 or maybe like a 4. This is actually a 4-star book. It was good. It was great. I loved it. And it was easy to read. It's not too much. It's like 300 pages. This one is a bit more, obviously, because like I said, there are much more elements in this book. But this is still my top favorite. Karissa Chen, thank you so much for doing the research to bring out this book. It was a joy and a delight reading this. So, yeah, let me know if you have read these 2 books, or if you're just finding out about them, or if you hope to pick them up, and let me know what you think. And another thing that it kind of gave me is that one thing I just need to mention is, especially in the stationery shop, is you have to plan for retirement, for old age, because yeah, it's so sad to see, because Bachman gets, I don't want to say shipped off, but yeah, he gets shipped off to a nursing home. So I'm like, man, this is so sad. Even in Homeseeking, the parents are just like left to live by themselves. So I mean, I was like, man, I need to plan for my retirement so that I'm taking care of that kind of thing. But yeah, those are things to think about. And when you say something is thought provoking, that's really what it is. It's, you're thinking thoughts like, okay, do I have this set up? Because you see them, the characters are so strong and active in their when they're younger, but then when they're old, it's like, declining health and a lot of things. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I feel like I was just rambling down the end. But yeah, let me know if you've read them. Let me know if you feel like you've met the love of your life, or that's something that you're still like, I'm not sure. I think you would know, because with them, they knew, like they met each other, and that it was like maybe love at first sight. So yeah, let me know if you feel like you met the love of your life, or maybe you haven't, or you are with the person that you are growing to love. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. This was such fun. It was so fun making this video. But thank you so much. I will see you guys in my next video. Ooh, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, and bye bye.